You got the touch. You got the power. Yeah!
Hello and welcome to But I Digress, the vlog where sometimes my mouth goes faster than my brain. I am your host, Nathan. Call me Nate Marchand. I went to Gen Con a couple weeks ago, and all I got for it was this lousy shirt. No. I'm kidding. Gen Con was amazing. It was absolutely awesome. I had an even better time this year than I did last year. Though that was partly because I actually took a couple friends with me this year. You've undoubtedly, true believers, been reading all of my blog posts that I've written about the convention. And if you haven't already, you can see some of what I saw and did right here in this video. Now, you may recall that in my very first vlog, which you can see here, I gave tips on selling books at conventions, all of which were things that I learned last year at Gen Con. Now, believe it or not, I learned even more about selling books at conventions this year. So here I am again with 5 more tips for you. So I guess you can look at this as a sequel video to my very first one. Now, if many of you, I know, are probably aspiring writers yourselves, particularly in the speculative fiction realm, so these will come in very handy because, as I mentioned in that first video, conventions like Gen Con are replete with people who will eat up your books. That's where your audience is, or at least a large chunk of it. So you definitely need to make sure, if you can get into a convention like Gen Con to sell your books, sell your stories, do it, because it will pay off in the long run. So, without further ado, let's get started. Number 1, network. I can't emphasize that enough. Now, this tip, I will admit, kind of encompasses all of the rest of the ones I'm going to give, and I think I probably touched on it in the previous video, but like I said, I can't emphasize this enough. When you go to a convention like Gen Con, especially a huge one, you are going to be rubbing shoulders with a lot of peers in your field, or people who are at least involved in your field. You'll be meeting up with other writers, so I highly recommend befriending them, talk to them, see if you can garner some advice from them, perhaps make some connections that you hadn't before, find out about other book publishers, or how they got their stuff published, any promotional tips they might have, all sorts of things they can help you out with. You may also run into editors from book publishers. They can be a great help. That will help get your foot in the door if you're looking for a new publishing house, or just looking for a publishing house in general. If you've been doing the traditional publishing thing, you might meet up with literary agents, and that will be a great connections to make. You might also run into people like book reviewers. I did that this year at Gen Con. I ran into several. I gave them free books so that they could read them and do reviews of them. I even ran into a guy who was collecting items from the vendors to put in an auction that his LARPing group was holding to raise money for a food pantry, and I gave him a book for that. There's a whole slew of opportunities you can run into. Interviewers who do podcasts, or journalists, I've run into them. They will give you opportunities to promote yourself and your work. They may come to you while you're sitting at your table, like a lot of them were doing with me, or you may run into them as you're wandering around and talking to people. You will probably have a dozen opportunities during the course of a convention. So keep your eyes open and try not to miss those opportunities. Number 2, interact with people during convention events. Another one of the reasons I enjoyed this year's Gen Con more than last year was because I went to more convention events and not just other writing seminars. I went to board game open plays. I went to a video game tournament. I went to dance lessons. Yes, they offer dance lessons at Gen Con. And I went to a concert, among other things. When you do that, you're not going to those as a seller, as a vendor. You're just there as a convention goer. You're there to enjoy some of the same things that your potential audience members are also enjoying. And while you're there, you can talk to them and introduce yourself, and then you can mention in the conversation, try to keep it natural while you're doing it, but just in conversation mention, oh, I'm a vendor in the vending area, and I'm selling my books, I'm an author. and then tell them a little bit about your books. Invite them to come see you the next day when the exhibition hall or vending area, whatever they call it, opens back up. And because you interacted with them at an event where you probably have something in common, they'll get to know you as a person. They'll see you not as someone trying to sell them something, but as a potential friend, a fellow nerd even. And that would be a great way for you to build an audience, and build a rapport, by doing it casually and just doing it for person to person, and not doing it as a seller to a buyer. Number 3, always have business cards on hand. This is a tip that harkens back a bit to the first vlog I did about selling books at conventions, and with the previous tip I just gave. Last year, I took some business cards with me, but I didn't take very many, so I ran out really fast. This year I took more, but I still ran out before the convention ended. That being said, what I wish I had done more was not just give out the cards to potential customers when I was at my table, but that I had taken some with me to a lot of the events to all of the events I was going to, and handing them out to those people that you talk to who might be potential customers and readers. Or if you go to some of the writing seminars like I did at Gen Con, then you can hand those out to people that you want to network with, other writers, editors, podcasters, those sorts of things. Because when you do that, you're not just another person that someone's talking to. You give them a card, it has a picture of you, it has your name, it's right there. It's a tangible reminder for those people to keep you in mind and either come back and see you in the vendors area or keep you in mind later. That way, that way they'll either come, like I said, they'll either come buy your book while you're there, or they'll check it out after the convention. Consider it a seed that you plant and then hopefully reap a great harvest from later. Number 4, have a good pitch. I mentioned in the first video that I did on selling books at conventions that I ran into another writer who I would like to describe as a used car salesman who was also an auctioneer. This year, he was my next door neighbor. So I had to listen to him all day, every day when I was in the exhibitors hall. This guy had his books' selling points down to a science. Almost to, it may as well have been scripted, is all I have to say. And he could deliver it in a really memorable and entertaining fashion. So he was selling a lot of books just because of the pitch. He was getting a lot of attention just because of his pitch. And even if he had one of those rare times, I should mention that I like to call him Captain Charisma because he was so good at this, but even on those rare times he didn't sell something, those people may come back later, and sometimes they even brought more people with them just to hear his pitch because it was so entertaining. But even if you don't have a personality that's quite like that, you're not that outgoing, that charismatic, at the very least you need to make sure that you get your book's major selling points and its plot synopsis down pat, so that way you can quickly and articulately explain that to all of your potential writers, all of your potential readers and customers. Because that way they can make a quick and informed decision about whether or not they want to purchase your literature. And on a related note, number 5, tailor your pitch to each customer. Now, I mentioned Captain Charisma, and even though it seemed like he was operating off of a script, he was still pretty good at improvisation, and he would tweak and change his pitch based on what kind of feedback he was getting from all of his potential customers. I, too, learned this great art in my sales pitch. One time, a couple of times I should say, I would run into people who told me that they didn't feel like they had much time to read. So then I would say something like, well, you should try the day after. It's short stories. You can read one story during your lunch break and then finish the book in a couple of days. Or you should try Destroyer because it's only 100 pages long, so you can finish it really quickly. Or you should read Children of the Wells because those get posted in 1,000-word chapters that are really easy for you to digest. Or my favorite one was there was a young family there with several little kids, all probably from their age range of about, I don't know, 3 to 6 at the most. And one of them was one of their kids, a 4-year-old girl, came over and eyeballed every single book that I was selling. I thought every single one of them looked cool, so I tried to make a sale through her. I started talking with her and making all the books sound really exciting and asking her what she thought was cool about them, and then telling her, hey, if you want these books, you're gonna have to talk to your mom. Give your mom the pouty face because that'll get her to buy the books for you. And she actually looked at her mom and gave her a pouty face. I have pictures of it. You should go on my website and take a look at it. She's adorable. And even if you don't make a sale while you're doing this, you've built a rapport with your potential audience. So they may come back later and buy the books or bring more people with them, as I mentioned was happening with Captain Charisma. And again, even if you don't make a sale, by building a rapport, it gives you an opportunity to hand out your business card. So there you have it. Take these tips and combine them with the ones that I gave in my very first vlog, and I promise you, after you go to a convention, you will see an increase in your readership and in your book sales. Now, with that finished, I want to tell you to make sure you come back for my next vlog, wherein I will do something new, and I will do something special. It's an episode that I have been looking forward to making for several months, and I'm really excited about it. And you should be too. Trust me. So, thank you for joining me this week on But I Digress. This is Nate Marchand, signing off.